So, welcome everyone to another Africa Hospitality Investment Forum podcast, or the AHIF podcast, the podcast that actually looks to spread a little light and a little information on the investment market, especially into the hospitality space in Africa. I'm here today with Paul Bridger and Mark Dunford. Paul is the COO of Rove Hotels based in the UAE, and Mark, who's probably no stranger to you from the AHIF days, if you've been to one of our events, or if you're in the Kenyan market, Mark is the CEO of Knight Frank. Welcome, both of you. So, welcome, and before we get going into the discussion, which the meat of it will be around affordable lifestyle, please tell us a little bit more about the work that you're doing within Africa. Over to you, Paul.
Hi, thanks, Matthew. So Rove Hotels is an affordable lifestyle hotel brand developed in Dubai. We now have about 3,500 keys open, with a similar amount of keys under development. We don't take ourselves too seriously. We're a young brand, and we're kind of targeting that kind of new segment of travelers that want a accessible price point, but don't want to compromise on quality, design, lifestyle. Our team are super young, engaged guys and girls. We don't have anything in Africa yet. We've kind of been focusing our brand on the UAE until this year. And then as of this year, we've kind of said, well, we're kind of ready to get out into new markets. Commercially, we've been super successful, and we're kind of ready to, particularly interested in kind of Middle East, North Africa, for our future development.
And Mark, tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, like you said, I'm a long-standing AHIFer. I'm also a rover. I've been staying at the Rove since they first opened in Dubai, and I'm a big fan. So I'm regularly in Paul's properties when I'm up for leisure or for work, actually. So I'm a big fan, and that's how Paul and I kind of connected a couple of years ago. Around that, we as Knight Frank, obviously, we're the largest privately owned real estate advisory firm in the world. We have been on the continent for over 4 decades. We've been in Kenya 25 years. This is our 25th anniversary this year. Kind of deal with all asset classes. And obviously I come from a hospitality background. So although now I'm kind of generic leadership, I'm still very passionate about and still very involved in the hotel space and the hospitality world. So, I've got a good handle on what's going on, at least in East and Central Africa, vis-a-vis the kind of hospitality space.
Perfect. And we're going to talk a little bit about affordable lifestyle and what it actually means to Africa and the continent. I'll throw this open to both of you. Feel free to throw it between yourselves. But firstly, how do you actually define this? What makes affordable lifestyle as a brand, and are there any specific requirements that need to be met to fit that statement?
I'm happy to kick off. I think for me, hoteliers generally get very hung up on star ratings. And, I think we've all pretty well traveled, and you can often stay in a 5-star hotel in some parts of the world and have a very different experience to a alleged 3-star hotel in places like the Middle East and whatnot. So I think the kind of lifestyle piece, which is a little bit overused and very much used in the luxury end, is around giving you more connection and than a kind of bog standard hotel, and is often tailored to either a specific interest or a specific area, and generally design kind of led. And for us, we target the kind of $150 price point. It used to be $100, and now it's closer to $150. And I think, but what our kind of motto on that is that just because you're paying $100, maybe that you shouldn't need to compromise on on service, on design, and these kind of aspects in your hotel. If you can deliver a hospitality offer smartly, and take out the things that maybe people don't need on particular occasions. Mark was saying he's over. Like, often when you go and stay in a hotel, you particularly in this part of the world, you're paying for valet parking, 5 restaurants, a spa, a concierge, etc., etc. And if I'm traveling for a large part of my travel, not all my travel, I don't need any of those things. So, why am I paying for them? And then I think the lifestyle piece just comes in with being a bit different, particularly in design and that aspect. Over to you,
Mark.
Mark. Tell me I'm wrong.
No, no, not at all. I agree with all of that. I think for me, it's also just about being easy and simple. A lot of the reason why Airbnb, for example, doesn't really appeal to single business travelers is because you just want to be able to pick up the phone and order room service or whatever, and that kind of, you don't have to sacrifice quality to have a simple product, done affordably. So fun, affordable, easy. Those are the big words for me when it comes to, kind of affordable lifestyle properties, and I think they appeal to, particularly the Rove portfolio really appeals to both the leisure and the corporate market, because I used to stay there for work initially when I was flying up to Dubai for meetings and stuff. I'd check into the Rove. It was affordable, and it was just super easy. There's a 24-hour shop downstairs and the one downtown, and so that was really handy. So that was great. But at the same time, if I'm going there on holiday, you can walk around in board shorts and flip-flops. And that's part of the reason that I'm wearing a polo shirt today and sitting at home, with a picture of a monkey behind me, because, I knew that Paul would be cool with that. It's very on brand for Rove. And I think that's really important for, that kind of affordable lifestyle market. Just kind of fun, funky, and affordable.
Yeah, that's why I wore my Africa shirt today, and as well. And actually, I'm going to. I don't know if Paul knows, I'm going to stay for the first time in a Rove next week, so I'll be able to report back as well on that. So, looking forward to it. And to Mark again, I guess then, what are you seeing about the adoption of affordable lifestyle in Africa? Has it already started? And if it has, where are some of the good examples?
It has. It's really still quite nascent, and it started really in the F&B space. So we saw a lot of younger expats coming into these markets, being seconded to markets in Africa for 6 months, 3 months, some of them for a year or two, and they wanted places that they could go and work. They didn't, they weren't going to rent an office. They didn't necessarily want to work from home the whole time, so they wanted to go to a cafe and sit there and have a chilled environment where they had good internet and do some work. And that's where it kind of started. And then I think also the growth of a middle class in a lot of sub-Saharan Africa has led to this kind of demand from local domestic tourists to look for things to do and places to go and spend their money without having the additional cost of an international flight and potentially the forex issue, right? So if you're earning in shillings, you can go and spend in shillings, or if you're earning in local currency, you can spend in local currency. So that then started. We've seen that brands like Onimo across Africa, they've come in that space, but they are still very much, or most of their properties are more kind of corporate-y, I would say, rather than true leisure properties. The same here in Nairobi. There's a lot of standalone examples in South Africa. There's Social House here in Nairobi that's been very successful, but again, more city hotels rather than leisure properties. And what's happening, there's a huge demand for leisure from these digital nomads, from these young expats, and also from the domestic middle class, young middle class. And at the moment, that gap's being filled by very small standalone properties that are owned and operated by an individual or two, or Airbnbs to an extent. Because here Airbnbs typically come with, if you go and rent a big house on the coast, it'll come with staff usually, because we're in Kenya. So it's actually a pretty fine line between luxury and not luxury. They're very simple, but they're very spacious, and they're on the beach, and you have a team of people who'll cook for you and clean and stuff. And so for a pretty reasonable price, if you go down with a group of friends, there's a lot of houses out there that people rent, and even smaller ones, some 1 beds and 2 beds that are on Airbnb. But there is certainly a huge demand, and product like what Rove did at La Mer, which I found really fascinating. And actually, that was the first time I met Paul, was at La Mer. Is that's really targeted at the leisure traveler. You can still stay there if you're a corporate, but it is a leisure property, and that sort of property just doesn't exist in Kenya or along the East African coast. Anyway, there's very few small, 10-room, even less type funky properties on the coast. But there's nothing that's a decent size that's still affordable, fun, and kind of caters to that market of young travelers, young expats, and domestics. So there's not a lot that's happened in that space. You have the legacies of this world and stuff, again, more corporate, as in more city focused, even though they are more chilled out and fun. Onimo, like I said, and Radisson Red to an extent, but they haven't really made a dent into the African market. They're only in South Africa, really. So there's this massive gap, and I think that's a sweet spot.
Thank you. And Mark's given you some of the drivers there, I think, Paul, but Rove has been hugely successful in the UAE. Why do you think now is the time for it to move into the African market, and why do you think it's such an attractive sort of proposition for Africa? I mean, Mark talks about the sort of lack of stuff, but why you could concentrate on the UAE and do very, very well there. So, what's driving this thinking?
So I think there's two things. One is we had to be ready as an organization. So, we've been focused on getting our product. We're owners and operators. So we've been focused on getting our product right, getting a substantial entity in the UAE to allow us to then, go overseas. We particularly if we're going to be in partnerships with others, we want to make sure that we've really nailed the product, the service culture, the brand, et cetera, et cetera. You don't want to have learnings on other people's dollar, as they say. And then I think all the things that Mark mentioned around the kind of demographics, just in this region, the whole region in general, the demographics of the growing middle class, of that time of everybody wants to own the best luxury hotel. It's still happening and has happened, but I think now also investors are very savvy to actually these kind of hotels can give you some amazing returns, and they don't have to be a boring proposition, which I think in the past there was probably quite, it was a less exciting, let's say, proposition to have a upper mid-scale hotel.
Yeah, I think
so. There's supply, there's demand both ends.
We're talking over each other. I was just going to say, I think that investment piece is really important as well, and the difference, the demographic that's going to stay at a funky, fun, affordable property is not as fickle as your 5-star luxury traveler who's flying in from overseas, right? Because a lot of the time your audience is domestic or at least regional. Yes, you'll get international people staying with you as well, but if there is an issue, or at least the perception of an issue internationally, your luxury travelers just don't come. We've seen that volatility in the 5-star market, particularly in some of the camps and resorts. As soon as there's the word Ebola is said, no matter where it's in relation to, or any kind of attack or anything like that, even if it's not in the same country, you just see that high-end market just dry up. Whereas even during COVID, in fact, a lot of these hotels, Tamarind Tree and Social House here in Nairobi, they did extremely well during COVID. There was a lot of people
through F&B a lot of time.
F&B and also people wanting staycations, and I know that in the UAE a lot of hotels did quite well. I know Ras Al Khaimah did very well out of the Dubai market going down there during COVID. So just having that captive audience in times of when things get a bit tough is really important, because it gives you a little bit more stability. So it really is the right demographic, and it means that your returns are a little bit more consistent, and your costs aren't as high, right? The costs of running a 5-star hotel are pretty expensive, particularly if you're importing lots of stuff.
What are the ambitions then, Paul?
It's interesting. Sorry, I'll say it's interesting that, Mark, that in the UAE, obviously our parent companies have a lot of luxury hotels, and we're almost without fail, every single one of them closed during COVID. And I got the call saying, "You guys are still open. What's going on?" And I'm like, "Well, we're going to be profitable in all of our hotels, so why would I close?" And
There you go.
it was to the point that people didn't believe me. They didn't believe we don't believe your forecast almost. And then month on month went by, and we're still kind of hit. Okay, we're not making the same margins we were in 2019, but we're still having a black number at the end of the month. And I think, as you say, that shows some resilience and adaptability in both this kind of brand, but also this kind of upper mid-scale market.
Exactly.
And Paul, what are the ambitions then for Rove within Africa? Do you have any specific markets? Are you looking for a number of hotels, rooms? What would you say success would look like in 5 years?
So, I mean, we're very early on the journey. As I said, we only kind of decided at the start of this year that we kind of wanted to get into new markets. I think our focus is very much North Africa, because they're both closer to home, and arguably easier to do business. And I think the key for us is that we have the right partners. Of course, location, but having the right partners to work with is very important for us. So we're not in a hurry, let's say, to get into these markets. I think right location, right partner, right model would be the kind of way forward.
So on to AHIF. As Mark says, he's a bit of a veteran with the event, but Paul, welcome for the first time. You'll both be talking on the agenda with different subjects. And actually, Mark, you'll be. Oh, look at that! What a good promotion. Good man. I'm surprised you didn't wait.
In the back
For the run.
And that's good. That's good to see. So one of the things that we've launched this year, actually, well, my colleague John Howell at AHIF has launched, is a airport real estate discussion, which links both the hospitality, of course. Look, he's got his AHIF t-shirt as well. Basically, what Mark is proving is that he only comes to our events for the actual running shirts. So, but feel free if this is exactly what drives you to a conference to come, because we do charity runs, and those charity runs raise money for local charities, and it's also a great way to network. So feel free to do that as a bit of a promotion. But look, you're taking on the sort of hybrid role there in airport real estate, and it seems to me, I'm no expert on the real estate side and certainly airports, but it seems to me as if this is quite a new awareness of what to do within airport real estate, and airport authorities are trying to suss out what they can do with their infrastructure. You're talking on raising capital, but have you seen this as a sort of new trend from airport authorities and such?
Is that to me? Awesome. Yeah, look, I think in Africa particularly, a lot of airports, and we had that problem in Kenya for a long time, are hard to get to. There's an uncertainty and a stress factor related to traveling because, if you're not within striking distance of the airport, you might miss your flight, traffic could happen, the road could flood or whatever it is, right? And we saw, as a result of that, a couple of hotels pop up in airport locations across the continent that were, providing that comfort that I don't necessarily need to only stay in town and then leave 5 hours early for my flight. I can stay at the airport and then just fall out of bed and go to the terminal at least on the last night of my stay or the first night of my stay, or if I'm transiting. And even if I'm just coming in for a day or two of meetings, I can go and stay at the airport. With that is the additional security of the airport cordon, the convenience of the fact that you're right next to the plane, so you're not going to miss anything. So that there was a lot of drive for that. I mean, in terms of the broader real estate piece, airport authorities in the rest of the world, or at least the developed markets of the world, have understood that there's a lot of money that can be made there from logistics. There's a lot of cargo that goes through airports. There's a lot of distribution. There's also, particularly from this part of the world, there's a lot of agri-produce that goes out. So there's cold storage opportunities and things like that. And then as part of that ecosystem, you need hotels, right? So there's, aside from air crew, there's all the people associated with those different businesses that are within the airport district, as well as the transit tourists and all of that. So it's a good way for airports to reduce their costs to airlines, because a lot of these airports rely heavily on taxing airlines for coming to them, which a big problem across Africa has been airlift. And if you're a really expensive destination to fly to, then you can be prohibitive to airlines to fly in. There's been a certain amount of protectionism as well from some of these governments to protect their domestic airlines. If they had a diversified income stream from better utilized real estate, there wouldn't be as much pressure, particularly if you've got government-owned airlines and government-owned airports. So then the money's just going to come in from somewhere else, and you can then loosen up a little bit on some other foreign airlines coming in and just increase traffic into your airport. So we're very early in that journey, a bit like Paul in his journey of discovering Africa. We're very early as real estate people in Africa, and I'm excluding South Africa, because they've already got pretty sophisticated airport real estate. But, here in the rest of Sub-Sahara, we're pretty early on that journey. But it is, I think the eyes of the governments are starting to open, and they're starting to appreciate that there's a lot of potential income that can come from developing plans and developing those ecosystems properly.
I'm really looking forward to that as part of the agenda, actually, because it's so new to us to discuss. So thanks for taking part in that. Paul, finally, final question over to you then is that you're talking on cutting costs and strategies for reducing those operating costs. I suppose you talked about it earlier. It was $100. It's now $150. We've had this huge inflation pressure, but I don't know if it was sort of exacerbated by the COVID or it was going to happen anyway. But even so, we were in this situation. It's got to be a top topic for owners. What can be done?
Well, the only thing I say on the subject is cutting costs can be a bit emotive. I think controlling costs is probably the way of looking at it. Interestingly, if I look across in the UAE, we, aside from some team staff costs, we've been quite smart. Actually, our costs are up, if not below 2019. So in terms of our operating costs. So I'm looking forward to the discussion on this one. I think what you have to be careful of in hotels is you don't want to cut something that the guest is going to notice, right? You don't want to do something that has an impact on your brand or the guest experience, because eventually you'll be further down the line. I think sustainability is a great opportunity to look at your costs and look at investing upfront to kind of reduce long-term costs, back office and front of house. And I think being a bit smarter, bigger hotels and scale give you some advantage there as well. But overall, I think smart management over short-term decision making is generally the way forward.
Well, thank you. And thank you both for joining today for this short podcast. I look forward to seeing, obviously, Rove next week for the first time, and I will be reporting back. And secondly, in a couple of weeks in Kenya. Cannot wait. It's been 4 years since I've been back, so looking forward to it. Thanks, guys, and best of luck, and look forward to seeing you.
Thanks, Matt.
Likewise. Thanks a lot.
Looking forward to having you down here.